So we're continuing the Tanya, chapter 19. This is a bit lengthier chapter. There are several ideas that are expressed here that are connected somewhat to the previous chapter, so I'm going to explain briefly a little bit what we covered before. So for those who were not here, you can pretty much follow the further elaboration that he gives on the anatomy of the soul. This Perek pretty much discusses the subconscious mind, as we call it. What is exactly going on in the nefesh, in the neshama, in the soul? On a spiritual level, we're not always aware that certain decisions are being made. We have certain, attractions, we can call them, or a certain pull or a drive that is not physical, but spiritual. And not everyone is aware what that drive is coming from. Unless, of course, you know that there is a neshama, that besides the physical body, there's something else. The real essence of the human being is his neshama, his soul. We don't always, however, detect it. We're not fully aware that it's functional. Many times that neshama, with all its faculties, all its power, is reduma, it is asleep. Shabbat partially is intended for us to be able to feel it. The physical body abstains from physical work, and hopefully gives a chance to that neshama, to that which is spiritual, to express itself. There are other times, however, that this neshama that may be dormant, asleep, all of a sudden springs to life. He's going to cover that a little bit in this chapter, because it's interesting how there are many Jews who may be very distant from God and who are not doing very well spiritually, but all of a sudden, at times, they're awakened. There's something that awakens them. And it could be all kinds of things. He's not going to touch upon all those things that awaken people. Something that awakens an individual could be a certain experience that he's going through, that perhaps his neshama somehow relates to it, is able to relate to it on a certain level. It could be because of a mitzvah that he performed, that merit of that mitzvah, of that special deed, helps him, gives him a boost, strengthens his connection to Hashem in such a way that momentarily he's overpowering the physical drives that are in constant conflict with his soul. It's not that the soul is ever extinguished per se, but the question is, who is the more powerful one here? Depending on who's the more powerful, that is the one that we're going to be listening to. So there could be various experiences that can bring one to awaken, to begin to listen, hopefully, to the soul. And that is very important, because the soul is the captain of the ship. It should be the one that makes the decisions. The body has, however, physical drives. And there's this conflict between them. That is the greatest conflict of all that mankind has to deal with from the very beginning of creation. And some people succeed to control themselves, and some people succumb to the evil inclination. So in the last chapter, we discussed a concealed love, ahava mesuteret, that a Jew has. Naturally, the Jewish soul, you can say, has embedded in it a certain drive that is very much divine. And it was designed that way. Hashem wants that there should be a people that should continuously do His will, that should not just be interested and focused on that which is physical in this world. We're not just here to enjoy ourselves. We're here to do His will. We're here to follow certain instructions in the Torah. In order to do so, we need to be endowed with the power to do so. It cannot be expected from one who's only physical, that's all he cares about is the physical world, to assume such great responsibilities that are spiritual in nature, unless he is given the tools. So we explained that the Jewish neshama is given the tools to succeed. Not only the map, but also something in the neshama that makes it more inclined to do the divine will. So it is through that love, that hidden or that concealed love, that it is able to perform the mitzvot out of love and out of fear. And this can come about as a result of the chokhmah in the neshama, the faculty of chokhmah, faculty of wisdom that is in the neshama, because in that faculty of chokhmah is where you find the divine light, the Or Ein Sof, as the Kabbalah explains. So if that divine light is in the faculty of chokhmah, it drives the individual to do, hopefully, the will of Hashem, even though it will encounter all along the path many hurdles, many obstacles. Nonetheless, it is there. It is there if we allow it to guide the individual, if we allow that light to basically guide our lives, then it will succeed in performing the mitzvot with love and with fear for Hashem. But it's not just the mitzvot. One of the most powerful capabilities of this divine light that is in the chokhmah is to enable a Jew, if there's ever a need, God forbid, to give his life for what he believes in. The ultimate sacrifice, Kiddush Hashem, to sanctify God's name, if asked to do so. Now, that is not very easy. That is very difficult. And the only way this can come about, we explained, was because of that faculty called chokhmah, which is something that does not fit, does not follow the laws of logic and reason. Chokhmah is beyond logic and reason. It just believes, it is connected by pure faith to Hashem, naturally, instinctively. Because if you have to use reason and logic, we explained last week, it could lead to trouble. One would have to weigh the pros and cons. Wait a minute, if I stay alive, I can accomplish a lot, or perhaps I can get away with it, perhaps this, perhaps that. The human mind can be a very powerful attorney in convincing anyone of the merits of something, even though he's wrong. One can see the two sides of the same thing and not be able to decide which one is more correct. He's able to see both sides, yeah, but how are you going to decide which one is correct? You need something from a higher source to tell you this is right and this is wrong. So subconsciously the neshama does have that ability to tell right from wrong. Not at all times, but that is what the neshama does. The neshama is pure. Subconsciously it can tell many times right from wrong. But that judgment is clouded. It's not always so clear. People are biased, right? People can be corrupted. So you need a higher source. So when it comes to normal decisions, regular decisions in life that perhaps don't have so many consequences, serious consequences, it's okay if we make a mistake sometimes. Hopefully we can repair the mistakes. Right? But sometimes you're pretty much cornered with making a decision that is perhaps the most important decision of your life. What this decision can make a big difference. You don't want to make a mistake. You want to do the right thing. You want that the neshama, the soul, should be the one that makes the decision, not the physical body that may not be able to take the pain, that may have some interest. That is where this love and fear of God can make a difference. But it is not something that we just pick up. It is something that we have naturally, which helps us. However, it is not always something that is expressed because of that conflict with the physical body. At times, however, when the individual is being asked to give his life, for some reason, at that point, even those who are weak, those who have succumbed to their evil inclination, all of a sudden they are prepared to do so. And we've explained that, how it was those who were simple, who had a simple faith, who were not so intellectual, who were not such great scholars, somehow they had that capability in Spain during the time of the Inquisition to give their life. Just like that, without thinking too much about it. Where did that come from? Where did that strength come from? Where did that pure faith come from? That ability. It's not normal. So we've explained that this has to do with that Or Ein Sof in the faculty of Chokhmah that is above logic. So the Jew has, by inheritance, we explained, through our forefathers, a certain neshama that is inclined, more inclined to do the divine will. It has to be like that. Otherwise, how can Hashem expect of us to carry on for so many years 613 commandments and to give our life if necessary for them? So that is what we've covered so far. We now understand a little bit how that neshama was transmitted to us, where it came from our forefathers, plus what is the essence of this particular love. In other words, where does it come from? That it comes from the faculty of Chokhmah. Now we need to explain the following. This neshama, this particular soul that we've inherited, what does it aspire to do? What exactly does it want to achieve? What's the nature of this love that is in the neshama? So this is a little bit what is going to be covered in this chapter. What is the nature of the concealed love? What exactly does it want to do? And how is the fear of Hashem included in it? So he begins the chapter like this. This concealed love, in order to understand it a little bit on a deeper level, let's turn to the pasuk in Mishlei that says, Ner Hashem nishmat adam. The candle of Hashem is the soul of the human being. All right, now when you read that verse, I don't think most people would understand what Shlomo Melech, what Solomon was trying to convey here. What does it mean that the soul is like a candle? So, Kabbalistically, there are various ways to explain it. He's talking about reincarnation as well. A candle can split itself into many sparks. With one candle, the original one, you can light many candles and not diminish the original, right? So there's something special about a soul that is like a candle. Obviously, you can interpret it on a simple level that this candle illuminates or guides the human being. It is light. It is a divine light. It is something very special that shows him the way if we were only to listen to it. But he goes into a different area altogether in explaining what the meaning here of Ner Hashem Nishmat Adam. First, he reminds us that when we use the word Adam, the term Adam, we're referring to the Jewish people. And this is a place where a lot of people make mistakes. Why is he differentiating between the Jewish soul and the non-Jewish soul by calling this one Adam and the other one is not Adam? The simple translation of the word Adam is a human being. And all human beings are special, and they're all created in the image of God. And I've explained this already various times. But it's important again to explain this so people should not misunderstand. There's no prejudice here, there's no discrimination here, there's no bias here, there's not that one is superior to the other. We're talking about different functions over here. The word Adam in Hebrew is somewhat like the pasuk says, Adameh la'elyon. The Jew's job and his aspiration should be to emulate the ways of Hashem. Adam, from the words Adameh le'elyon, I need to emulate the ways of Hashem. I need to be a light unto the nations. I need to behave in a certain way. And if I do so, I become Adam. I elevate myself to a level called Adam. Adam Arishon, the first man, is called Adam. Even though in Lashon HaKodesh in Hebrew you have other terms. You have Ish. The Torah uses the word Nefesh. All kinds of terms to describe a human being. So when Shlomo Melech uses the word Ner Hashem Nishmat Adam, the But Tanya is telling us here that he's talking about especially the Jewish soul. There's something about the Jewish soul that is compared to a candle. The flame of a candle flickers and is always rising. That's the nature of the flame. And since the Jewish person, since the Jew was entrusted with observing the mitzvot, with working the land in a spiritual sense, because by Adam HaRishon it says le'ovda u'leshomra. Man was entrusted to work the land, to take care of the land. But that's on the physical sense. The Jew was entrusted with the same type of function, le'ovda u'leshomra, but on the spiritual level. So since he is entrusted with that, and he does so through the observance of the mitzvot, he's always naturally aspiring to achieve that. His neshama is driven to do that. Therefore, ner Hashem nishmat adam, in the same way that the flame of the candle flickers and attempts to rise. What does rise mean? It attempts to go back and connect itself to its root, to where it comes from, to its shoresh, to its makor. Now, what kind of root are we talking about? Physically, what is a flame trying to do? Not spiritually. So you know that there are four elements: earth, water, air, and fire. The element of earth is the lowest one. That which is lighter than earth, and therefore one level above, is water. One level above that is air. And then is fire. The element of fire is the highest level. It's a little bit difficult to explain unless maybe you studied the weather, or you studied a little bit physics or astronomy. You will realize that the atmosphere is divided into several layers. There's different concentrations of gases in the various layers of the atmosphere. As you go higher, the gases diminish. You don't have as much of the gases that you have here, down here on Earth. And what's interesting about this is that the temperature goes down as you go up, and all of a sudden, after a certain altitude, it actually goes back up. It becomes hotter, and then it becomes lower, and then it becomes hotter again. It's interesting. And I don't think we need to go into why that happens right now, but that's just a fact. And it could be that this idea of the fire element at the highest level is somewhat related to the solar wind. In other words, we know that the sun is a very powerful celestial body, and that a lot of its heat in the form of energy and other forms reaches very, very far into the solar system, right? In other words, the heat of the sun, the rays of the sun, the energy of the sun affects what's going on Earth. So apparently there's some element of fire or something connected to this element of fire at a higher level that reaches out into space. And he mentions this briefly, that this ner, the neshama of the individual, is like this flame. It's like the flame of the candle is flickering in such a way that it attempts to reach the highest level possible from where it comes from, which is the yesod ha'esh, the element of fire. On a higher level, that is where fire is. Even though we don't see it, we don't see air either, but that is how the world is pretty much divided. That the element of fire is the lightest of all, and it may be, I'm saying this on my own, it may be related somewhat to the fact that the sun has this great power reaching all the way to the earth. Now he brings down the book Etz Chaim. In the Sefer Etz Chaim, it says there that this shoresh, that this yesod, this element of fire, is right below the moon. Okay, without trying to understand what the author meant of it on a simple level, a simple interpretation would mean that somewhere between the earth and the moon, there is this, I guess, solar wind or some element of fire that exists on some level that can be felt either through the ionosphere, if you know what that means. There's ions and there's magnetism on a certain part of the atmosphere that is being affected by all this solar wind that's coming in contact with it. I'm not sure if that's what he means, but it could be that at that level, that is where it is detected, at least, much more than it is. Even though down here on Earth we detect it too. I mean, you can light a match. There is something called fire. But as far as the element itself, the source of where it comes from, it is the highest of all. And this candle that is flickering attempts to reach out to its source from where it comes from. That is why it rises instead of going down. All right, that's what he says. So this neshama, he says, is compared to a candle that is always trying to reach the source of where it comes from. And even though what will happen to it, if it does eventually try to escape its wick, it will extinguish. Nonetheless, it attempts to do that. In other words, it doesn't matter that this candle will self-extinguish itself by trying to get away from the wick. And by the way, the wick is the body, the physical body, that is, it's being attached. So long as we're alive, we have the neshama connected to a wick. Once that neshama leaves, once it's disconnected, the person dies. So even though the nature of this candle is such that when it is completely gone and removed from the wick, it cancels itself out, it still wants to do it, because that's the nature. That is the way it is created, that it aspires to go back to its makor. Now what happens when it eventually goes back to its source? It's not canceled out completely. It's only overpowered by the greater light, which is the divine light of Hashem. It is somewhat absorbed into that light. It doesn't mean that it's completely gone. What is gone is its independence. When a human being is alive and he has the neshama in him, he thinks of himself as something independent. Right? He has emotions, he has an intellect. So he thinks of himself as something apart. But in reality, that neshama is a chelek Eloka mimal, is a part of God. And it aspires continuously to go back to where it came from. Now, even though this neshama knows that when it leaves, it will somewhat disappear, not entirely, but disappear as an entity, as an independent entity, still, it wants to do that. That's the nature of the neshama. It wants to leave the physical body and return to its maker. So the question is, why should it want to do that? Why should it want to disappear as an entity? So the Tanya here explains that when we use the word nature, teva, we're borrowing this term to explain something which is abstract, something which is not logical. This is not logical. Usually somebody does not just want to cancel itself out. But here we're talking about something that is by nature subservient. It can easily nullify itself because it is subservient by nature to Hashem. And the nature of the neshama, because of the faculty of the chokhmah in it, and that faculty of chokhmah has the light of Hashem in it, it is able to do that which is not logical. And that we explained last week is something very difficult. For many people, it is very difficult for them to do something that it does not make sense to them. And that is why they don't accept what the Torah says. It's not logical to them. Very important point. The neshama is capable of accepting and doing something which is totally illogical. And the example that he uses, and he will use again, is sacrifice, when one needs to give his life, even though it does not make sense that that should be the decision. Just because he's making me bow down to this idol, in my heart I don't believe this stuff. I'll just make believe. No, the neshama is not going to be prepared to do even that. Not even to make believe. And that's what he's going to explain partially a little bit later. How come? Because it's not logical. There's something in the neshama of the Jew that won't let it. As long as, of course, it's awakened. So he explains that this is the rule of anything b'kedusha. Anything that comes from the side of holiness has the ability to do that which is not logical. It has the ability to be subservient. It has that nature, that ofi. If it does not have that, then it's missing in the kedusha. It's missing in its holiness. Anything that is nimshach, he says, anything that is drawn from the chokhmah is easily cancelled out in the or and sof. In other words, it easily can nullify itself in the or and sof, and does not think of itself as something independent. And that is why he says chokhmah is koachma, which in that word you find the terms of itbatlut, of nullification, and I guess you can use the word abnegation, when one can give his life for something that he very much believes in. This is how he begins the chapter, by telling us that this is what's so unique about the neshama, why it is compared to a candle, how it aspires to go back to its shoresh, to its makor, continuously. Its wishes are very, very different than the physical wishes of the body. And if we become aware of that, then we would completely run away from doing anything that is contrary to Hashem's wishes. So he's going to explain that is really what is happening to many people who are continuously doing the wrong things, not because they're so bad, but because they're asleep. Had they known the damage that they do, what every sin causes them, they wouldn't do it. But they're not aware of it. And we have to explain that too. Why is it that they're not aware of it? Because at some point, they do become aware of it. When? When they're asked to give their life. All of a sudden they're awakened. There are times that this same neshama, all of a sudden is aware. All of a sudden does care. So why not all the time? Before he goes on to explain further, he says, let's take a look at the difference between the neshama now, which is divine, and the klipa and the sitra achara. When it concerns the impure shells, when it concerns the other side, not the side of Kedusha, what you have is the opposite desire. You have the desire to do that which you want, not what Hashem wants. The nefashot of umot ha'olam, other souls, not belonging to the Jewish nation, that is how they are. They're not necessarily, it all depends, of course, on how divine they are. Some are more divine than others, but basically, that soul which is not as divine has more of an interest to do what it wants, not what Hashem wants. And this in itself already tells you a great deal. Look at the difference between those people who are willing to go out of the way to help others, to do a good deed, and those who are more selfish. You see this all the time. Where does it come from? One is more generous, one is less generous. Of course it depends on the upbringing, of course it depends on education, it depends on one's nature, if he's kind or not, but a lot depends on the neshama. Now this neshama is something which psychologists cannot diagnose. Many of them don't believe in it. So they're trying to figure out all kinds of things about the human being, and they never will. There's a great mystery about human behavior that a psychologist, psychiatrist will never be able to know unless he agrees, comes to terms with the fact that there's something called a neshama. Twins. We spoke about that in astrology years ago. Twins, according to astrology, they're only a few minutes apart perhaps, can sometimes be very different. How come? Based on astrology, based on mazal, they should have a very similar disposition, a similar nature. They're from the same parents, maybe similar genes. Right? So what's going on? Why are they so different? Even though astrologically one can explain how a few minutes can make a difference, but that's not enough. Judaism tells us how some genes are from the mother's side. And it could be that one child has more of those genes than the other child, even though they're twins. But still, it's not enough. The greatest contributor to how an individual will act, conduct himself in life, is the neshama. Which neshama does he have? There's different kinds of neshamot. What is it doing in this world, in this lifetime? Is it a reincarnation? Does it have something that it has to repair, rectify from a previous life? So therefore, he or she is born with certain challenges that they have to overcome. So what if they're twins? They may have totally different missions. And when you have a different mission, you have different capabilities that you were given. Different challenges, different capabilities, strengths and weaknesses to deal with them. So that's something that, how are you going to ever know? But just looking at a chart, an astrological chart. You won't see, you see the map, but you can't see everything from there. Because a lot depends on the mission of the neshama. You know, where is the neshama coming from? What's the nature of that neshama? There's something that you cannot detect just by looking at the mazal of the individual or looking at the genes. They should both be very similar, but they're not. Now, twins do happen to have, for the most part, a lot of identical things about them, not just in appearance, but in their life too. Many of them get married at the same time, you know, end up doing something similar. I'm sure you've noticed it, but not always. Where's the rest coming from? From the neshama. So the neshama is unique, and there's different kinds of souls, different kinds of neshama. So if it's a nefesh, neshama coming from the klipot, from the sitra achara, intrinsically it is more interested in itself than it is in doing the divine will. So you have kids and later adults who are rebellious, who are not inclined to do that which is spiritual. They're very materialistic. It's not just the mazal, it could be the neshama. And they could be born to any type of parents. The best of parents can sometimes have two children that are very different. One is so righteous, and all he wants to do is the will of Hashem. And one is totally not interested. Totally not even a little bit. Wow. The same parents, the same education, the same school, the same teachers. Where is this coming from? The neshama. People forget about that. That's something that you cannot bring into the laboratory and diagnose. You know, what are you going to look at? His mind? What's the mind? They grew up in the same home. Why are they so different in their attitude? Remember, there's various contributing factors here. Definitely the mazal, the astrology, is one. Very important one, actually. But in the end, the captain of the ship, the one that makes the decisions, the free will, is the neshama. And if the neshama is more inclined to do that which is spiritual, then it will have an easier time with that which is spiritual. A neshama that is not really sympathetic to that which is spiritual will struggle to be religious and committed to do the right thing. They need to be encouraged a lot. It's not easy. So that's where the difference is noticed, is how spiritual one is or not. The neshamot that therefore are from the sitra achara, from the impure side, are more interested in doing that which serves them. They are interested in being a self, in being an entity, being independent from God, not being told what to do. This is the exact opposite of the other neshama that we just described as one who's willing to be subservient, one who's willing to be, to give himself up, basically. Like the candle that flickers out and separates itself from the wick. It wants to return to its source. It doesn't care that it will not be something. It's going back to where it belongs. Very different type of aspiration. Therefore, the rabbis call those souls that are more interested in themselves metim, even though they're alive, they're like dead. Because chokhmah is what gives vitality. In other words, the faculty of chokhmah, where the light of Hashem is present, that is what gives vitality. And therefore, on them, the pasuk, the verse says, yamutu velo bechokhmah. Why is that? That they're considered like dead, just because they don't have the light of Hashem. Yes, when you don't have the light of Hashem, you are misguided. There's no kivun, there's no proper direction. Besides that, something that is dead means something that is disconnected. So when a neshama is not being driven by the faculty of chokhmah, by the light of Hashem, it is disconnected from Hashem. It is totally not focused on the divine will. So therefore, they're considered like that. So now he turns the attention to Posh'ei Israel. Therefore, even those amongst the Jews who are sinners, or the Reshaim, the wicked, it may appear as though they're doing the wrong thing, obviously. They're not engaged in doing what is expected of them. But that will not always be the case. Because if they are presented with a challenge to their faith, then they will react differently. So you could have someone who's been not eating kosher all his life. He's been succumbing to his evil inclination, to the Yetzer Hara, doing all kinds of things, stealing money, whatever it may be, cheating, lying. So he's committing all kinds of transgressions. But all of a sudden, he's being forced to give up his life. Bow down to this idol, or we kill you. And all of a sudden, he's prepared to give his life. How come? How come all of a sudden for this he's prepared to give his life, as many have proven that they were capable of doing so? But throughout his life he succumbed to his evil inclination and did the wrong things. So the Baal HaTanya explains, because at that point when he's being forced into giving up his faith, all of a sudden that chokhmah, that faculty of wisdom awakens in themselves. All of a sudden that faculty of wisdom awakens in them, and it is able to influence them to give themselves up to Hashem. Then they're considered alive. Before then, that level of chokhmah was considered reduma, was considered dormant. It's not that they don't have it, it is asleep. And because it is asleep, the light, that light, even though the light, the divine light, is there, it's present in the nefesh, the Kabbalah says it is as though it is in exile. The term Galut HaShekhinah is very much elaborated on in the Kabbalah to describe a situation where the Shekhinah, the presence of Hashem, the divine presence, is not at its height, where it could be. Not as powerful as it could be. Remember, the light of Hashem is very, very powerful. As it comes down into this world, the Kabbalah says there's a certain tzimtzum. It constricts itself. It is not as seen. Nonetheless, if we would have a Bet HaMikdash, if we would have the temple, if the Jewish people would be in the land of Israel observing the mitzvot, that divine presence would be felt, very much felt, and it would inspire. It would inspire the people to do that which is right. It would protect them. That's what the Shekhinah does. Shekhinah, if it resides with us, it acts as a protector for us, as a guide for the Jewish people. It's a very different type of experience when we have the Shekhinah versus not having the Shekhinah. When the Shekhinah is in Galut, a better way of understanding is what the Torah says. Banochei ester astir, I will conceal my face. That's a much better way of understanding what it means the Shekhinah is with us, the Shekhinah is not with us. When the Shekhinah is with us, it is more revealed, it is felt. We can directly see the miracles and detect the presence of Hashem with us. That's a better way of understanding it. The Ashgacha of Hashem, the divine providence, is experienced in a very powerful way. When the Shekhinah is in Galut, it means that the Shekhinah is in exile. Where is God? So this is a better way of explaining Shekhinah in Galut versus not being in Galut. But in the same way that the Shekhinah can be in Galut, the Or HaEloki, the divine light which is present in the faculty of Chokhmah, in the Nefesh, in the soul, can also be trapped, in a sense, in exile amongst the klipot, amongst the impure shells. The reason it is trapped, because where is it? It is now in the Nefesh HaBehemi. It is to be found in the animalistic soul, which is the more powerful one. When the animal soul is more powerful than the spiritual soul, than the Nefesh Eloki, then obviously this individual will not be doing the will of Hashem so easily. So it is in the form of exile. This neshama is in the form of exile when it is trapped in the Nefesh HaBehemi, which is why the love that he's been talking about is called a concealed love. Love is usually not concealed, he says. Love is something that is apparent. Love is something that is revealed. When we say a love is concealed, what are we saying? We're saying that there's something blocking it. That's why it's called concealed. What's blocking it? The ta'avot, all the desires of this world. When the Rasha has his mind devoted to do that which is physical, right? To engage in that which is materialistic, so his entire mind and his entire attention is given to that, that blocks the love that he potentially could have to connect with Hashem. That is why those people who are very materialistic have it more difficult connecting to Hashem than those who are not so materialistic. That's why he says, that's why it's called Ahava Mesuteret, a concealed love, because this love is being blocked. What is it being blocked with? He says, through a levush sak of the klipa, through the garments of the impure shells that can be seen amongst the Poshei side, the sinners. And what happens to them when their spark, when their divine spark is in galut, when it's being trapped in the animal spirit in them? Not only is this love completely blocked, rabbis tell us that when a sinner commits a wrong, it can only be because a ruach shtut entered his mind, a spirit of folly entered his mind. Such an individual who is trapped by the klipot, by the impure shells in the nefesh habehemi, the animal spirit, can become delusional. You know what the word delusional means? The ruach shtut, it's a spirit of folly that's entering his mind. Why do something like that? Don't you realize the danger? Don't you realize what you're doing to yourself? You're becoming completely separated from Hashem. I don't want to compare it because it's not something, but imagine somebody who's shown an x-ray of his lungs after smoking so many cigarettes. Look what you're doing to yourself. You're killing yourself. You're destroying your family, your career, your life. When, in the olden days, people were not aware of this. When they used to smoke, they thought it was okay, it wasn't so bad. Later on, people realized how harmful it is, so some of them stopped smoking. If the individual would know how much damage he's doing to himself on a spiritual level, then he wouldn't do it. So what does this tell us? This tells us that he's not cognizant completely. He's in his words, he's not sensitive enough to the fact that a avon is something serious. He actually thinks it's not so bad. Why is it called delusional? Because he thinks I can still be a good Jew even though I commit all the sins. There are people like that. I can still be a good Jew. What does that tell you? It tells you that he's completely insensitive. His sensitivity to that which is spiritual is dull. You know what I mean by dull? It's asleep. And that's why he doesn't realize. Because if he would know that this causes so much damage to him, his prayers are not going to be accepted upstairs. So why are you praying? He doesn't know that those prayers are not effective. Because had he known, he wouldn't do what he's doing. So that sensitivity in him towards that which is spiritual is dull. Now comes the big question. If his sensitivity towards that which is spiritual is dull, then how is he able to give up his life if asked to? That is something very, very special. For a Jew to be able to give up his life when asked to, in other words, when the situation arises, that is the ultimate sacrifice. How come all of a sudden his sensitivity is not dull? You understand the question? Here his sensitivity is dull. He doesn't realize the damage he's doing to himself by committing these sins. Then how come he's able to give his life? So he explains like this. We just talked about galut and nefesh, how the nefesh, the light of the nefesh, is in the form of exile. It's dormant. And in that state, it cannot be operational. It cannot influence the da'at, the understanding of this individual to do the proper thing. He's so immersed in the physical world that the physical controls him completely. So what exactly is an exile? That part of the faculty of chokhmah that gives vitality to the rest of the nefesh. But the actual source of the chokhmah, the source of where this chokhmah comes from, has not gone into exile. The source of chokhmah always remains in the head. It's not connected to the heart. The head and heart are separate. It is true, however, that the Reshaim, their head is being controlled by their heart. In other words, they're completely slaves of what their hearts desire. Reshaim, it's true. But the moach is still something apart. No human being's free will is taken away from him. Paro's free will was taken away from him. But he still has that little bit of free will. He can decide. That chokhmah, the source of the chokhmah, of that faculty, is untouched. That did not go into exile. And what did we say all along about this faculty of chokhmah? Chokhmah is prepared to do that which is not logical. Chokhmah accepts something because of faith alone. That is unique to the neshama. The neshama can accept something like that, even though it doesn't understand it naturally. Now, even though we have free will, we still have a neshama that on a certain level is pulling us to do the right thing. In other words, it's not that we have to make a choice and just use our head. We do have a pull from the neshama telling us, do this. But we have a pull from the physical body telling us, no, do that. So there is a struggle. Yeah, but this pull from the neshama through the faculty of chokhmah is prepared, has the ability to accept something even though it doesn't make too much sense. That was not touched by the heart. That was not affected by the heart. And because of that, it can all of a sudden resist the pressures and say, no, I'm not giving up my Judaism, I'm not giving up my beliefs. I will continue to be Jewish, even though it may cost my life. Wow. You didn't behave that yesterday when you cheated, when you stole, when you lied. Yeah, that chokhmah was pretty much trapped or controlled by the heart. But the source of the chokhmah, that which concerns faith, that which concerns his emunah, is untouched. This can only be because of that divine soul that we have. And if you look at history, you will see that there were a lot of people who were simple, not intelligent. Simple people, they were not so tzaddikim, who gave up their life. And now that's how he finishes up this chapter. He tells us, you know how powerful this faith is? That they were not even prepared to make believe that they're bowing down, even though deep down they don't believe in this. So why shouldn't they just make believe, save their life? I don't believe in this, this is nonsense, but in order to spare my life, I'll just make believe. See what I mean? The mitzvah is don't. Don't bow down, don't show any respect to that which is impure. It's a big sin. Even though deep down in your heart you don't believe in it. Why not? So this is a very interesting idea. Towards the end of the chapter, he says there's an element of fear in the love of Hashem. The fear, because you love Hashem so much, you're fearful of doing something that will detract from that love. Even though this only will come about through something minor, like just make believe. He says, look how strong, look how powerful this love is, and the fear that's included in this love, that it does not even entertain the thought of doing anything which is wrong, b'machshava, dibur and ma'aseh, which are the garments of the soul, the speech, the thought, the speech, and the deed. Even the garments, even the external garments, the external ones are the speech and the deed. All I gotta do is just make believe. No. That is how the fear is included in the love. I love so much, I'm afraid of doing the wrong thing. I'm afraid of making him upset at me. Imagine if a husband loved his wife, the wife loved her husband so much, that each one would be afraid to do anything that would harm the relationship. It's beautiful. That's the way it should be. On the highest level, even though they're both pretty much all the way on top, ahava and yir'ah, but on the highest level, it's a yir'ah mitoch ahava. It is a fear as a result of the great love that I have for Hashem. In other words, they go hand in hand together. Just to finish up, he says like this. It is possible for a Jew who, even though has been a poshea, even though he has been a sinner, to all of a sudden awaken and be able to withstand this great challenge to his faith. Because what happens is that something in him is awakened. And that's the light of Hashem in the faculty of Chokhmah. How does it exactly help him? So he says, that light of Hashem is so powerful that it actually drives away all the klipot. And he brings down here a few pesukim that pretty much insinuate the idea. I'm going to read it to you. As it says, Kol hagoyim ke'ayin nigdo, all the nations of the world to Hashem, they are as though they don't exist. Ki hine oivecha Hashem yovedu, they can easily disappear. Ki hames donag, harim kadonag donasu, he brings down certain verses that compare the disappearance of the enemy as wax that melts. So what they all have in common is a description of how the forces of evil, the impure forces, which are enemies of Hashem, can easily disappear in the presence of Hashem. So if the presence of Hashem, the light of Hashem, is powerful enough, it can drive them away. So any individual, but especially one who's endowed with a more spiritual soul, can all of a sudden awaken and drive away all those impure shells, even though for so many years he was controlled by them. That is how he ends the chapter. It could very possibly be the one who an entire lifetime was the slave of the impure shells and was basically consumed by materialism. That's all he wanted. He was controlled by them. He can completely let go of that which is mutar and asur, that which is permissible too. How could he? He was so used to it. Even if he was so used to it, even if he craved it all along, he was sold on it. That light of Hashem is powerful enough to drive them away, to melt them away, to make them disappear. And that is how he's able to come out of it. One, therefore, is not completely a lost case. I never tell anybody that he's a lost case. because of that divine light in the faculty of chokhmah in his head, can one day awaken. As we see that it has potential in a situation where he's basically having to give his life. Why is he prepared to do that? Because when it comes to the faith, faith is something which is not so logical. He can do something which is illogical. He has that power. Boom, it just happens. If he would have to think about it, it wouldn't happen. But what about the rest of his life, the rest of his behavior? Well, his chokhmah, or his nefesh eloki is a bit dormant and being controlled by the klipot, by the impurities. But you see from various situations that he is capable. He doesn't get into too many examples, but I can share with you many stories of people who all of a sudden began to cry, who were moved to tears, and of course decided to make a big change in their life because of something they saw or experienced. It's an awakening of the soul. The rabbis tell us in the Kabbalah that on Yom Kippur, or Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, if one during this prayer begins to cry all of a sudden, he should know that at that moment he's being judged upstairs. The neshama is able to detect it, to feel it. On a subconscious level, the neshama feels all kinds of things. The neshama is able to see things in a dream that when we're awake, it does not see. Finally, when the physical body is asleep, it awakens. But depending on its level, how high can it go? And what it will see. Will it see nonsense? Or will it see something prophetic, a prophetic vision? That depends on the level of the soul. When does that happen? When the body is asleep. The neshama can express itself. On Shabbat, we said before, there are times that that soul, no matter whose soul it is, can all of a sudden awaken to realize that which it is not aware of while it is fully awake in this physical world, working, eating, and doing that which is physical. Shabbat enables the Jew to abstain from that which is physical, to enable him to connect to the spiritual world. It's a holy day. And the same thing when one is asleep. And here, the example being used here is that even though this individual is a sinner all his life, there are times that for some reason, all of a sudden he's prepared to give his life. Wow, that tells you something about that spark, that divine spark in him that is able to drive away at certain times all those impurities, because it's dealing with his faith. And that faith, where is it originating from? Where does it draw its power from? From the faculty of Chokhmah, where the order of Ein Sof is residing, the light of the divine light, and especially in those neshamot that are more divine. So just to finish up, when an individual is not prepared to even make believe that he accepts something, this does not stem from love. Because if all it was love, the love is not affected. If deep down in your heart you don't believe something, and you just want to make somebody happy, okay, I bow down to this. The love will not be affected. So it's not the love that's holding him back. Why doesn't he want to do it? His love will not be affected. He loves Hashem. You can love Hashem and still do something just for the sake of giving the impression. So he finishes up the chapter, no. The neshama will not even do that, will not even want to give that impression because of the faculty or because of the attribute of fear in the love. That is where fear comes in. The fear of not wanting to in any way take away from the love of Hashem. So you have a combination of love and fear for Hashem that is what is able to drive us or motivate us to do the mitzvot and give us the strength to stay away and to resist that which is wrong. And even the most simplest individual that has that divine spark in the faculty of his chokhmah is able at certain times to awaken and to resist, even though logically there's no reason why he should not just give the impression. But look how sensitive the soul could be. It's wrong. Ze lo matim li, as we say in Hebrew. This is not befitting of me to do something like that. Sensitivity. If human beings were really sensitive towards the feelings of others, they would never do something that they know would harm the feelings of another individual. If somebody is not careful in hurting somebody else's feelings, either he does not realize it, or he's totally insensitive. Right? It's important to realize it. That's why he was telling us that there are a lot of people who simply do not realize the damage they're doing, how they're becoming so distant from Hashem through the sins. That is why it's a ruach shel shtut. It's a spirit of folly that is overtaking so many people, that is basically blocking their potential love of Hashem. The love is concealed. The love is really there, but it's being blocked. And obviously, the way to release it is by becoming aware of how special this soul really is, what its responsibilities in life are, what life is all about. People who are not made aware of these things may never find out, unless they learn the hard way. Something happens to them, and they learn the hard way. Just end with a quick story. I don't know if it's a real story or if it's used as an example, but there was once a child that was very hungry for attention from his father. And the father was a very, very busy lawyer, and did not give too much attention to his child. And one day the child approaches his dad with a piggy bank of coins. How much do you charge by the hour so I can get your attention? You know, how much do you need that I should get your attention? You know, lawyers, they charge by the hour. How much is your hour? You know, this is a situation where a father does not understand, does not realize that the child needs the attention, he needs the love, he needs the time. And this happens not only between parents and children, it happens between husband and wives, it happens between us and Hashem. You know, obviously we need to take the time for that which is important to us. Unfortunately, many of these spiritual involvements, spiritual ideas, spiritual concerns are not as important to some people as they are to others. They don't realize the importance of them, and therefore they don't devote time for it. Prayer is one of them. The study of Torah is another one. If people would realize the importance of these ways of connecting to Hashem, you know, these are ways that one connects through the study, through the prayer. These are moments in our life that should never be overlooked. Life is short, and we only have so much time, and we must be careful in how we use and how we manage that time. The ultimate difficulty or hurdle that people really have to overcome is that dormant neshama that is so asleep because it is being hijacked by all these additional interests. You cannot love the physical world a lot and expect to have that same love for Hashem. It's impossible. You can't split yourself. One has to realize that the main focus should be the connection with Hashem, the connection with his family, with his kids. And they should not be overlooked, because that which is physical is really less important. Otherwise, that is what happens. People become trapped in that, and their sensitivity for that which is spiritual becomes numb, becomes dull. Numb is a good word. Numb meaning completely asleep, completely unaware of how special it is and how much damage they've been doing to themselves. The good news is that sometimes the Kadosh Baruch Hu awakens us, awakens those who are asleep, and reminds them that they're special, that Hashem cares about them, and hopefully they will find the right assistance to come back to Hashem and to reconnect to Hashem. That can happen. It has happened to people later on in life, and obviously the sooner the better. Our tradition is that before Mashiach comes, many people will awaken. Hopefully their sensitivity to that which is spiritual will become stronger. And that can only happen if they sit and learn Torah. Hopefully the light of the Torah will show them the way to come back to Hashem.